Hey guys, as we wind down tonight, we step back into a world without ticking clocks, countdown timers, or flashing phone screens. No notifications, no alarms, just the slow, deliberate unfolding of time, like bread rising near a too-cold hearth. Imagine standing in a field at dawn, waiting for the shadow of a stick to move slightly to the left, and that's your cue to start work. Or lighting a candle and watching it burn inch by inch, the melted wax whispering your hours away like a slow leak in reality. Time didn't beep. It sighed. It dripped. It echoed in the call of roosters and the tolling of bells that were often wrong but still obeyed. And yes, you might not survive this one, especially if you're the type who panics when the Wi-Fi goes out. So, before you settle in, feel free to give the video a like and hit subscribe if you are truly enjoying the journey. You can also leave a comment. Let me know where you're listening from, what time it is there. It's always a small wonder to see people tuning in from so many corners of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that gentle hum in the background, and together, let's ease into tonight's story. Before clocks lived on walls, before seconds could be measured by quartz or quartz by electricity, time moved slower. It's not slower as in relaxing, slower as in confusing, sometimes unfair, and often personal. No two towns told time the same way. No 2 hours felt the same, even in the same day. Morning came when the rooster remembered. Evening came when the candle died. And if you asked someone what time it was, they might stare at the sky, shrugged and say, "Bread's almost done." Time was a neighbor, not a number. For the vast majority of human history, telling time wasn't a matter of looking. It was a matter of feeling and guessing, and being wrong. Peasants, monks, nobles, they all danced around the same invisible sun, guided by shadows, stars, drips, bells, and scents, and meals that were only warm by accident. You lived by rhythms. The rhythm of the light, the rhythm of your master's voice, the rhythm of your aching back, and the sharp bark of a church bell that meant you were already late.
No apps.
No countdowns, no comforting buzz from a smartwatch. It's just a wax candle and a vague feeling that it was probably almost soup time again. In tonight's journey, we'll explore how people marked their days when time wasn't printed. But worn in bone and ritual, and the smell of burned tallow, we all see what it meant to live in a world where time moved like molasses through a sieve, unpredictable, unstandardized, and slightly suspicious. You all measure your minutes by the shadow of a tower, and your sleep by the patience of your pillow lice. Bells will ring late, roosters will lie, candles will betray you, and still the days will pass, slowly, strangely, faithfully. Are you ready? Let's begin. Time for you is not something you own. It's something that happens to you, like rain or lice or your cousins singing. And just like those things, it usually arrives when you least want it to. Wake up not to an alarm. But because the rooster next door finally decided to scream into the dawn like he has been personally offended by the sky. Maybe you slept through the first crow, or maybe the rooster is still drunk from eating fermented apples again. Either way, you're already behind, because you were supposed to be in the field before the morning bell rang. And guess what? The bell hasn't rung yet, or maybe it has. You can't hear it over the wind, or the goats, or your uncle's snoring. But it doesn't matter, because someone will blame you either way. The village bell is supposed to mark time. It's supposed to. It rings when the priest says it's time. And the priest decides that by looking at a sundial that only works when the clouds agree, which they rarely do. It's less a scientific system and more a series of apologies wrapped in tradition. When the bell is late, the whole village runs on ghost time. Bread is underbaked, milking starts too early. And you were always the one who gets blamed, even if you were the only person who bothered to show up. You try using shadows sometimes. A stick in the dirt, a little mark where the sun was yesterday. Very precise. Until the dog eats the stick, or someone uses it as a fire poker, or it rains. Again, and when it rains, all bets are off. Time disappears completely. The sky is gray. The ground is gray. Your mood is gray. You eat lunch at what turns out to be 9 in the morning. You show up to Vespers 3 hours early. You milk the cow twice. The cow is not impressed. Sometimes you try listening for the church bell. Maybe it will ring at terse. Maybe not. Sometimes Brother Ulrich forgets, or gets distracted, or falls asleep standing up again. Once the bell rope broke and no one noticed for 2 days, those 2 days, glorious chaos. No one showed up to the field on time. Bread was burned. Pigs wandered loose. And for once, it wasn't your fault. You try to use your stomach instead. You figure if I'm hungry, it must be midday. Logical, right? Except today your stomach is lying. It tells you it's dinner time before breakfast. By midday, it's staging a revolt. And by dusk, it's given up entirely, sulking quietly while you nibble a turnip that tastes like disappointment in damp burlap. You once tried to keep time with candle wax? You carved little notches into a fat tallow candle. 1 notch per hour, you thought. It worked for about 3 days. Then your little brother used the candle to cook a frog. Time melted. Literally, there's no schedule, only suggestion, no hour hand, just guesswork. No structure, just panic. And so, your entire life is governed by the loudest sound. The bell when it remembers. The rooster when he's sober. And your stomach when it's not lying to you. Time, in short, is a rumor. You'd think, with all the poems and paintings about sunrise, that using the sun to tell time would be simple. It is not. Sun is not your friend. It is a flaming authority figure in the sky who shows up when he wants, leaves early in winter, and refuses to clarify anything. You squint at the horizon in the morning. Is that dawn, or just a particularly enthusiastic cloud? The sky is sort of pink, but also sort of gray. Maybe it's sunrise. Maybe you've hallucinated from hunger again. Either way, it's time to go. Probably. You head to the fields, where your job is to labor until the sun tells you to stop. But he's vague about it. Noon, the sun is high, or high-ish. You hold up your hand like your grandfather taught you. 4 fingers between the sun and the horizon means something, supposedly. You forget what. Maybe it means you're late. Maybe it means your hand is too small. You curse the sun. He ignores you. Cloudy days are the worst. The sun plays hide-and-seek like a toddler with boundary issues. One moment it's there, next it's gone. Your day becomes guesswork. Your tasks become riddles. Did you weed long enough? Is it time to rotate the sheep? You don't know? Sun is sulking behind a thick layer of atmospheric ambiguity. In summer, you work until you forget what your own house looks like. The sun stretches the day like a stale piece of dough. Thin, uneven, and likely to snap. You keep thinking it must be nearly evening. It isn't. It's just the cruel middle part. Your arms ache. Your back threatens to unionize. But the sun says keep going by continuing to hover smugly over your head. In winter, the sun does the opposite. He shows up late, yawning behind a fog bank, then leaves before tea. You barely get started before it's over. You light the fire for supper, and the sun is already packing up his briefcase.
Thanks for nothing.
Sometimes you look for shadows. People say shadows tell time. True. They also tell lies. A long shadow might mean it's morning or evening. Or maybe you're just near a tree. You once followed a shadow across a hill thinking it was a good time marker. It was a dog. The dog peed on your boot. Time, once again, betrayed you. You try to compare things. When the shadow reaches the door, it's dinner. Until someone moves the door, or builds a new shed, or the goat eats part of the wall. Then the whole schedule collapses. But still, you try. Because what else is there? You measure your life by light and shadow, not because it works, but because it's all you've got. The sun is your clock, your boss, your unreliable friend, who never confirms plans and changes the schedule midday. And every evening when the light fades and your work ends, not because you're done, but because you can't see anymore, you curse the sky one last time, stumble back inside, and prepare to do it all again tomorrow, as long as the sun shows up. There is one clock you trust. One beacon of truth in a world full of lying bells, moody roosters, and unpredictable sunlight. That clock is hunger. It growls. It nags. It speaks in burps and belly echoes. When your stomach starts singing a mournful ballad to itself, you know it must be time to eat. That's how it works. Or at least, that's how you hope it works. Until you realize that hunger, much like everyone else in your life, has no idea what it's doing. You wake up starving. This would make sense, except you ate before bed. A thick chunk of bread with a single bean mashed into it. A feast. And yet here you are, chewing your own tongue by sunrise. Your stomach tells you it's noon. The sun says it's barely morning. The bell hasn't even tried ringing. Who's right? Probably the goat. You try to wait until breakfast. Breakfast? A generous word. It's not a meal. It's a ritual of disappointment. Some cold barley mush, a hint of dried turnip if someone sneezed near it the night before, and yesterday's crust that could double as building material. You eat slowly, not because you're savoring it, but because your teeth hurt. The crust fights back. It wins. Then you return to work, telling yourself you'll know it's midday when your stomach screams again. Except this time, it forgets. You're too tired. Your body gives up on complaining. You miss lunch entirely. Which is ironic because lunch would have been the exact same crust, only broken into smaller pieces to feel like variety. By the time you remember to be hungry again, it's late afternoon. Someone says it's nearly supper. You hope they're right. You hope supper means warmth. You hope it's not turnip stew. It's always turnip stew. Dinner, or what passes for it, is served. A thick broth, more water than substance, flavored with dreams and garlic peelings. You eat it anyway. You eat it like it's your last meal. Might be. The next meal depends on your neighbor's pig not escaping again, and your cousin remembering which mushrooms are food and which ones make you see music. You once tried marking time by meals. When I feel hungry the second time, it's the 6th hour, you said. Noble plan. Until a festival came around and you had access to fritters. Suddenly, your whole schedule collapsed into sugar and regret. You can't even trust feast days. They move. They change. The priest forgets them. The calendar is wrong. Once you thought it was Easter, it was not. You fasted for no reason. God probably laughed. You mark time by food, but the food doesn't cooperate. You forget whether it's been 2 hours or 4 since you last chewed something. You try chewing your thoughts. They're stale. The fire sputters. Your stomach grumbles, and someone asks what time it is. You answer with a burp and a guess. The only real constant is this. You are always hungry, and you are never quite on schedule. If there were one creature responsible for your entire daily schedule, and also your daily rage, it would be the rooster. A feathered clock with confidence issues, strutting, preening timepiece powered by confusion and vengeance. You're told as a child that roosters crow at dawn. That's the rule. It's the rhythm of the land. But here's what actually happens. The rooster crows whenever he feels like it. Before dawn, during dawn, long after dawn, and occasionally in the middle of the night, because he heard a breeze and panicked. You wake up in the dark. The rooster's already shouting like a bard with bad news. You stumble out of bed, convinced you're late. You're not. The moon is still up. The rooster was bored. You try going back to sleep. You cannot, because now the rooster is arguing with another rooster across the lane. One crowing match leads to another. It's a concert now. A choir of poultry lies, and they are winning. You start treating the rooster like a weather report, which is to say, you pretend to believe him but pack an extra tunic just in case. If he crows once, it might mean sunrise. If he crows twice, it means you forgot to shut the hen house. If he crows 3 times, he's probably possessed. Either way, you're already up, already angry, and already stepping in something warm and regrettable. At one point, you tried raising your own rooster. A noble experiment. He was supposed to be better, quieter, more accurate, less aggressive toward boots. He failed on all counts. He attacked your neighbor, crowed at his own reflection, and once triggered a false alarm that caused half the village to skip lunch. He was dinner by winter. Still, roosters are the default alarm system. The church bell only rings when someone pulls the rope. The sun needs clear skies. Your stomach lies to you. But the rooster, he is always there. Screaming, misleading, existing. Sometimes you try to interpret his crow. Was that a wake-up crow? A run wolf's crow? A where's my corn crow? It's a lost language of shrieks and feather rustles. You once thought he crowed because of some natural internal clock. Then you saw him crow at a goat. There is no logic. There is only noise. In summer, he starts earlier. The days are longer, and he takes that personally. In winter, he forgets entirely. You sit waiting for a sound that never comes, staring into the cold like a confused beat. Your neighbors trust their rooster implicitly. You do not. You have seen too much. You have heard the 2 a.m. false dawn. You have shoveled after his lies. And yet, every morning you listen for him. You swear you won't. You try to resist. But when that screech cuts through the air, you rise. Angry, tired, betrayed, but awake. Because in a world where time is slippery, subjective, and covered in mud, sometimes the loudest voice wins, even if it's coming from a chicken with a superiority complex. You don't wear a watch. You don't even know what a watch is. But you do know one thing. When the church bell rings, you move. You don't ask why. You don't ask when. You just move. The bell is time. Or rather, it's supposed to be. The village priest rings it for important hours. Morning prayer, work beginning, work ending, meal times, and anything vaguely labeled vespers. But the bell doesn't run on gears or weights. It runs on the priest. The priest, may the saints forgive him. It's not a morning person. Sometimes the bell rings 10 minutes early. Sometimes an hour late. Sometimes not at all, because Father Anselm fell asleep reading about eternal damnation and no one thought to wake him. And so your life becomes a game of guess the gospel. Did the bell ring twice today? 3 times? Was that a bell or a cow coughing? You once mistook the neighbor's sheep bell for morning mass. You were halfway through a badly mumbled prayer before realizing it was just Bessie trying to scratch her neck on a fence post. The bell is heavy. It's hung on a frayed rope that bites into your palms if you try to pull it yourself. You've done it once. Never again. It pulled back. You nearly ascended to heaven right then and there, bell and all. Sometimes the priest tries to be clever. A short ring for terce, a long ring for sext, a double ring for an emergency. Except that once, a double ring meant Brother Hubert dropped the wine again. No emergency. Just a very sticky chapel floor. You depend on the bell for everything. Fieldwork begins with it. Meals try to coordinate around it. But it's not consistent. And when it fails, you fail. If the bell rings late, you're late. If it rings early, you're unprepared. If it doesn't ring, you stand there holding a hoe and wondering if today even counts. There was a week last year when the bell clapper broke. No sound. Just a sad, silent swing in the breeze. Chaos ensued. People missed church. Pigs wandered unchecked. No, you milked the wrong cow. Twice one day blurred into the next like a poorly written psalm. To make matters worse, the bell is also a weapon, spiritually speaking. If it rings at night, you panic. Fire, invasion, a lost child, particularly aggressive sermon, nighttime bell tolls mean doom, or sometimes just that Father Anselm couldn't sleep and thought everyone else should wake up to.
Oh.
The worst is when the bell is late but not missing. You hear it, but too late. You're already in trouble, already muddy, already mistaken, already halfway into something you weren't supposed to start, like harvesting on a saint's feast day. Again, that was awkward. But no one blames the bell. The bell is sacred. You, however, are not. You get the lecture, the punishment, the extra chores. The bell gets polished, and so you wait. Every day. For the uncertain sound of divine scheduling, echoing through wind, rooster crow, and the occasional thunderclap, you wait for that familiar, unreliable clang. And when it comes, you move. In your village, time doesn't just change by the hour. It changes by the month, the season, the mood of the wind. And the problem with seasonal time is that it doesn't tell you when things will happen. It tells you when things will go wrong. Spring arrives with mud, not hope, mud. Everything is damp, including your sense of direction. The sun rises early, but hides behind fog. You think it's morning. It's actually mid-morning. Or not, you check the sky. It looks like tea time, or funeral weather, possibly both. Time in spring is like soup, always shifting, usually too thin. Summer comes blazing in like a drunk noble at a feast, loud, bright, and overstaying its welcome. Days stretch so long you lose track of them. You work until your legs forget how to bend. You assume it's nearly dusk. It's lunchtime. Again, you eat under the glare of the sky, sweating onto your barley. The sun hangs above you like a cruel supervisor refusing to clock out. By autumn, you're tricked. The light turns golden. Everything feels gentle. You slow down. Big mistake. Autumn is a scam. You think you have more time? You don't. Suddenly, the sun dives early. Your chores aren't finished. You run around in the half-dark, chasing geese and gilt, trying to harvest everything before frost whispers. Too late. Winter is the punchline. No sun. It's just shades of gray, cold wind, and the quiet suspicion that you've overslept every day. The bell sounds muffled, when it sounds at all. You spend half the day guessing whether it's morning or just the part of night where you hallucinate daylight. You light a candle. It flickers. It does not clarify the hour. You learn to read time in strange ways. The length of shadows on snow. The number of breaths it takes to warm your fingers. Whether the chickens have bothered to come out yet. You become a specialist in probably. Probably morning. Probably supper. Probably the right day to visit your cousin. Probably not the solstice. Again, there's no calendar nailed to your wall. There's an almanac somewhere. But it's in the priest's study, locked behind a door that squeaks in Latin. You remember feast days by food. Or by the absence of it. Wasn't yesterday's salted fish? No, that was Saint Somebody's Day. Are you sure? No. You eat the fish again. Seasonal time is circular, not linear. Days blur, melt, overlap. What was once July now feels like 2nd March. You mark time by when the frogs start croaking, when the river floods your laundry spot, when your joints begin their annual mutiny. Every season has its own version of wrong. Every year you hope it will make more sense, that you'll finally understand the rhythm. You'll track the patterns, predict the shifts, work smarter. You don't. Time is not measured. It is survived. You've tried the sun. You've tried the bell. You've tried your own stomach, shadow sticks, and an increasingly passive-aggressive rooster. None of them are reliable, so now, as a last resort, you do something desperate. You ask the monks. You head to the monastery with the humility of someone who knows they're about to be both judged and corrected. Monks, after all, don't guess the time they chant it. Their whole day is built around it. Prime, terce, sext, nun, vespers, compline. Names that sound like obscure spices or illnesses, but each one means something. A prayer, a moment, an hour, sort of. Cute. Brother Theobald. He is already halfway through a chant that sounds like a hymn and a yawn having a polite argument. You wait. You shuffle. Finally you ask, "Brother, what hour is it?" He blinks slowly as if he has not seen a peasant in many years and isn't entirely sure if you're real. Then he says, "It is terce." You nod as if that helps. It does not. You ask, "What does that mean?" He replies, "It is the 3rd hour after sunrise." You do some math. You are not good at math. You think so? Morning. He says nothing more. He is already drifting away, chanting again, leaving you with the same amount of certainty you had before. None. The monks have candle clocks sometimes, fat candles with marks carved in the side. Each notch burns down to signify an hour. It's clever. If the air is still, if the wax is pure, if no one sneezes on it. You once tried copying this? Yours melted sideways and set fire to a small chicken feather collection? The monks forgave you. The chickens did not. Monks also use water clocks. These are clay bowls with holes in the bottom that drip steadily. The problem is they drip faster when it's warm, slower when it's cold, and not at all when the bowl freezes. Time, it seems, is allergic to consistency. Sometimes the monks ring their own bells, try to sync your day to their tolls, but you're still confused. The bell for sext sounds very much like the bell for nun. One time you thought it was evening, sat down to rest, and missed an entire turnip delivery. You envied the monks. Sort of. They seem to know what's going on, till you realize they spend most of their time preparing to tell time. Ringing things to tell people it's time, and then recovering from telling time. You once heard Brother Oswin say, "The rhythm of prayer aligns the soul." You're not sure what that means, but you're pretty sure your soul is offbeat. So yes, you ask the monks. And yes, you try to follow their sacred schedule. But you are not a monk. You are a muddy, cold, turnip-haunted person trying to figure out if it's too late to eat lunch and too early to fall asleep. And when the monk says, "It is compline," you nod solemnly and return home to feed the pigs, because no one told them what time it was. You decide, in a rare burst of misguided ambition, to take control of your own time. No more depending on bells, monks, or roosters with authority complexes. You will invent a calendar. A personal one, just for your hut, your turnips, your sanity. You start with markings on the wall, simple scratches made with a bone or a burnt stick. 1 line per day. Logical. Until your cousin mistakes it for a game and adds 12 extra lines, you begin again. It's time higher up, out of reach. 2 days later, the goat eats that part of the wall. You switch to stones. one stone per day. You stack them in the corner of your hut with reverence and mild paranoia. The pile grows. Then one night, someone kicks it over in the dark, mistaking it for a sleeping dog. You start again. It's time in a basket. You'll promptly forget which stone was yesterday's and which one was today's. One of them might be from last month. One might be a potato. You try tallying by moon phases. Simple, ancient, elegant. Except you forget to look some nights. Clouds happen. Sleep happens. At one point, you confidently declare, it's the third quarter moon. It is a full moon. Everyone laughs. You vow revenge. You try naming your days. Fish day, bread day, day when Jeffrey tripped over the well again. This works for a week. Then you forget the order. Was fish day before or after Jeff's fall day? Did bread day come twice this week? Probably. You feel both empowered and incredibly stupid. You try counting days until the next market, but the market is delayed due to rain, and then move to a nearby village because someone spilled honey on the pigs again. Your count is off by 4, maybe 5, possibly 6. You start eating honey on purpose, and there's the problem of shared time. You invent washing day, but your neighbor insists it's roof thatching day, or scrubbing laundry while she's throwing straw. You get hit with a bundle of wet weeds and lose all interest in civil compromise. Eventually, your calendar becomes a collection of objects. A smudged turnip, a burnt spoon, 3 owl feathers, and a piece of string with a story you no longer remember. None of it helps. All of it feels significant. At one point, you try copying the church calendar. Feasts, fasts, saints, seasons. But no one agrees on which saint goes where. One village says it's St. Mildred's Day. Another says, that's next week. You celebrate twice. Your digestion does not. You give up. Mostly your days go back to being measured by sound, smell, and the shape of your chores. You wake when the light stabs your face through a hole in the thatch. You eat when your hands stop shaking. You sleep when your thoughts become confusing and oddly poetic. Time is not a thing to be counted. It's a thing that walks beside you, muttering incoherently, sometimes tripping you with a stick. So no, you do not invent a calendar. You invent frustration. Festivals, in theory, should be joyous. Markers of time. Anchors in a drifting sea of identical days. Something to look forward to when your meals blur together and your socks dissolve into compost. But in your village, festivals are less about celebration and more about collective confusion. Take Candlemas, for example, or what you think is Candlemas. You remember something about candles, obviously. In Mass, you prepare. You even wash your face, which is a rare and dangerous luxury in February. You show up early, too early. The church is locked. Father Anselm appears an hour later, holding a cabbage and no candles, mumbling that Candlemas is next week, or last week. He's not sure. You light your candle anyway. It flickers in shame. Feast days are worse. Saints multiply mysteriously. You're told today is St. Bertrude's Day. You say, who? No one knows. But she's important. She deserves fasting. Or is it feasting? You eat half a pie, then feel guilty. You repent by not finishing the pie. Then you eat the rest to avoid waste. God is probably fine with it. The festival calendar is handwritten somewhere in Latin, updated irregularly by someone with poor penmanship and questionable spelling. Some entries are smudges. One page is just, next to a fish drawing, you consult the village elder. He says it's probably Whitsun. You don't know what that is? He doesn't either. You celebrate anyway, with caution. There's always someone who insists the festival is today. There's always someone who insists it's tomorrow. And one person, usually your neighbor Edith, who swears it was last month, and you all fools for wearing garlands on a Thursday. You try to follow the signs. The air smells like bread. This must be St. Arnold's Day. The pigs are restless. It's clearly Pentecost. Someone brought out the nice cup. It's either a wedding or the end times. You once planned ahead, baked something festive, decorated a stick with ribbons. You told your cousin to wear his least moldy tunic. Everyone mocked you. Too soon, they said. The next day, the bell rang, and half the village paraded around the field without you. Too late, they said. You burned the stick in protest. Time around festivals warps. The days leading up to one stretch like dough, left too long in the sun, soft, uncertain, and a little sour. Afterward, it collapses. No one knows what day it is. You still have flower petals in your boot 3 days later and no memory of why. Sometimes you think festivals are less about marking time and more about disrupting it. A brief pause in the usual misery. Formal invitation to chaos. For one day, you are allowed to be late, be loud, eat slightly better food, and wake up with a headache that feels vaguely spiritual. But even in that, timing is key. Too early, and you're a fool. Too late, and you're forgotten. You must hit the precise moment when joy is permitted and mildly sanctioned by the church. Never do. Somewhere out there, you've been told, is a magical thing called an hourglass. It's not a glass that belongs to the hour, but a glass that contains it. Time, they say, held inside a narrow neck of sand. Precise, beautiful, and absolutely useless to you. You've never seen one. Only nobles have them, okay? Or monks with libraries to clean to trust. You once heard that the Lord Steward used an hourglass to time speeches. 5 minutes of sand, turned upside down if he had more to say. You can't imagine needing more time to talk. Can't imagine having glass. In your world, glass is for windows that dainty belong to you and bottles you not allowed to touch. It's expensive, delicate, and breakable. 3 qualities that do not survive well in your hut, your barn, or your social circle. But still, you dream of the hourglass. You imagine holding time in your hand, watching it fall. Not in chaotic bursts, like your rooster's nonsense or your cousin's shriek-laugh, but smooth, steady, predictable, a thing you could trust. You imagine turning it over and saying, "When the sand stops, I will stop." Revolutionary. You once tried to make your own version, filled 2 small jars with ash, and poked a hole between them. It lasted 12 seconds and ended with a gray puff and a very sooty floor. Your aunt called it sorcery. Your cousin called it cleaning. You called it defeat. You ask around. No one you know has touched an hourglass. One man says he saw one in a bishop's hands once, during a sermon about death and patience. The bishop turned the glass while talking. Sand fell slowly. The peasants fell asleep even faster. The man remembers nothing else except that the bishop had very soft hands. You begin to wonder if the hourglass is even real. Maybe it's just a story, like warm baths or accurate maps. A tale told to children, so they believe time can be gentle. Even if you did have one, what would you measure? How long it takes your soup to boil over? How long your neighbor takes to borrow your ladder and never return it? How quickly your fire dies the moment you turn your back? And let's not forget, sand. Clean sand. Controlled sand. It's not the gritty kind stuck in your socks after a long day herding pigs through the riverbank. The hourglass sand is smooth, dry, contained. The opposite of everything in your life. But mostly you resent the idea. It's the idea that somewhere someone knows exactly how long an hour is, that they can see it pass, second by second. While you're out here measuring time by whether your left knee aches yet, you've lived your whole life in approximate time. Muddy, imprecise, and just good enough. And maybe that's what makes the hourglass so infuriating. Promises order, elegance, a moment you can name. But you don't get names. You get guesses. The sand falls somewhere else, not here. Brother Firth believes in order. He believes in wax, fire, and lines drawn with trembling fingers. And most of all, he believes that time can be burned. You arrive at the monastery just before sunrise, which you think is appropriate, but may in fact be wildly late. Brother Firth is already in his cell, crouched over a fat column of candle wax the color of old butter and regret. He is carving notches into it with the same reverence some people reserve for saints or soup. Each notch, he explains, marks an hour. As the candle burns, the wax melts down to each notch, revealing time as something slowly devoured by flame. It sounds logical, clean, mathematical. You nod. Then the candle sputters and eats 2 notches at once. Time just leapt forward by accident. You pretend not to notice. So does Brother Firth. The candle clock, in theory, is brilliant. A physical manifestation of time. 1 candle equals 1 day or 1 night or 1 vague, waxy blur. It depends. It depends on the air, on drafts, on how straight the candle stands, on whether anyone sneezes nearby, and most of all, on mice. Mice love candles. They nibble the base. They chew the edge. One mouse even climbed the wax once and left small paw prints in the sacred timeline. Brother Firth forgave him. All God's creatures mark time in their own way, he muttered, before resetting the entire candle and starting over. You try watching it. The flame flickers, wax pools, slow, then fast, then nothing. Then a sudden surge like the candle remembered it was late for something. You blink, another notch disappears. You are now behind schedule, though no one can say why. Brother Firth uses the candle to guide his hours of prayer. Matins, lauds, terce, you try to follow. You cannot. The candle makes sense to him, whispers divine mathematics. To you, it smells like burnt sheep and confusion. You ask what happens when the candle burns too quickly. It is a sign, he says. A sign of what? A sign to use a thicker candle. You respect his logic. You fear his candles. He keeps a collection. Tall ones for long nights, short ones for focused prayer. One is green. He refuses to explain. You do not ask again. Once, a storm blew through. The candle guttered, smoked, then split in two. Time literally broken. Brother Firth mourned it like a friend, then immediately started melting a new one. Wax is not perfect. It runs. It warps. It remembers the shape of the mold, or the shape of the table beneath it, or the shape of despair. Brother Firth smooths it with wet fingers, praying under his breath. His fingers are blistered. His time is melted. You watch the candles shrink. Time collapsing, inch by inch. You don't know what hour it is, but the wax is lower. That means something. Maybe you ask if he ever wishes for a better system. No, he says, lighting another wick. A system that fails is still a system. You nod. You leave quietly. But you still don't know what time it is. But at least now, you've seen it drip. You return to your hut with an idea and a stolen sense of purpose. If Brother Firth can measure time with wax and faith, surely you can do the same. Minus the faith, and with slightly more panic, you find a candle. It is not the ideal type. It's short, slightly bent, and smells faintly of goat. But it's wax, and you are determined. Carve notches with a dull knife, you also use for vegetables, and occasionally self-defense against beetles. The candle resists. The wax crumbles. One notch looks fine. Next one looks like you attacked the candle in a fit of rage, which technically you did. Light it anyway. The flame flickers, hopeful. You feel powerful. The candle burns unevenly. One side melts faster than the other, leaving you with a small wax landslide and an immediate sense of dread. The first notch disappears in 12 minutes. The second takes an hour. The third just sort of gives up and slides sideways off the candle like a board snail. You stare at the candle, unsure if you're behind schedule or have accidentally entered a new century. You try to track it. You try to focus. You fall asleep. When you wake up, there is no candle. It's only a wax puddle on your table and a tiny scorch mark on your one good spoon. You try again. This time you make the candle taller. You borrow wax from your neighbor who doesn't ask what for. He knows better. You pour it into a mold made from 2 wooden bowls. In a string of hope, it comes out lumpy.
Still?
You notch it with more care.
Are you watching?
You even try measuring the distance between marks. You feel like a scientist, a very tired, slightly illiterate scientist. The candle burns better this time, till a fly lands in the wax. It struggles, thrashes, and dies with great drama. You are now ahead of schedule. Possibly. The candle leans. Your table is uneven. You wedge a folded scrap of cloth underneath to fix it. The cloth catches fire. You put it out with a cup of weak ale. The room now smells like defeat and damp linen. You realize that Brother Firth was not a genius. He was a madman. A madman with patience and very little furniture. You go outside and try to think. The sun is out. You have no idea what time it is. But you do know that the candle is a lie. It's a beautiful, waxy lie. You keep the melted candle stub. It feels important. It's like a relic of your attempt to measure life. Place it near your bed, next to the dried gourd you once mistook for a prophet, as the gourd remains silent. The candle doesn't argue. Maybe you'll try again tomorrow, or next week, or never. For now, you go back to using your stomach and the distant sound of Brother Firth chanting in his cell, which, while unreliable, is at least less flammable. You didn't think about the supply chain. You never do. You thought candle clock equals time. But you forgot that wax isn't something that drips from heaven like divine gravy. It must be made, bought, or begged from someone who owns bees, and the people who own bees, they're not generous. You run out of wax on day 3, you scrape together the leftovers ends of candles from previous festivals, bits stuck to the bottoms of old jars, one mystery chunk that smells vaguely like sadness. You melt it all in a pot that used to be used for soup. The soup pot now becomes your time pot. This is objectively a downgrade. The wax doesn't melt evenly. Some parts bubble, some parts sulk. You stir it with a stick you hope was never used for manure. The mixture is lumpy, viscous, judgmental. You pour it into a mold made from a split drinking horn. It holds, miraculously. You notch it carefully. Hopefully, you light it. It wheezes. The flame is small, apologetic. It burns with the energy of someone who showed up to the wrong appointment, but is trying not to make a scene. The wax sags in one direction, then collapses entirely. Your hour is now a pancake. You go looking for more wax. You visit the tallow chandler. He laughs. Not because he finds you funny, but because you re-knot the first peasant this week asking for wax for something important. He offers you tallow instead. Animal fat, soft, greasy, and wildly untrustworthy. You accept. You have no pride left. Tallow burns, sort of. It smells deeply, like rancid hope and expired soup bones. You light your tallow candle. It drips like a nose in winter. Pools. It defends the room. The cat leaves. Candle burns 2 notches before you sneeze and extinguish it entirely. Time has once again abandoned you in a puff of smoke and disappointment. You ask around. No one has beeswax. No one has bees. One man claims to have wax-like material made from boiled pine sap and mashed duck feathers. You thank him. You do not accept it. You consider raising bees. Then you remember you are afraid of anything that buzzes and does not apologize. You abandon the plan. Your neighbor offers old shoe grease. Contemplate it longer than you're proud of. In the end, you burn a small piece just to see. It smokes. It shouts. Sticks to your wall. And now you must explain to guests why the side of your hut smells like regret and feet. Wax, you realize, is a luxury. Monks have it. Nobles have it. Time, therefore, is a luxury. You are poor. You are waxless. You are timeless. So you give up. You return to the old ways. You watch the sun. Listen for bells. You pretend that being 15 minutes late is a spiritual act, not just confusion. Your candle clock melts quietly in the corner. Lopsided, blackened, useless, but still, beautiful in its way. You've made peace with your candle clock being wildly inaccurate, vaguely insulting, and possibly haunted. What you haven't made peace with yet is the fire. Fire, you see, is the part no one talks about. Candle clocks sound elegant. In theory, controlled flame, slow-burning wax, time that drips and flickers in a poetic way. But in reality, you've just brought a tiny, unpredictable arsonist into your wooden hut. The first incident is minor. A breeze sneaks through the thatch, tilts the flame sideways, and catches on a hanging strip of dried turnip peel. You leap forward. You slap it out with your sleeve. You succeed mostly. Your sleeve now smells like charred vegetable. You call it a win. You try again the next night. This time, the flame burns too high. You suspect the wick is too long. Or perhaps angry. It dances like it's trying to signal nearby ships. The wax bubbles ominously. A drop hits your table. It leaves a mark the exact shape of despair. Try not to read too much into it. You move the candle to the floor. It's safer. Maybe. Until your cousin's dog comes in, sniffs it, and knocks it over with a tail swipe that feels personal. The candle rolls. Time escapes. You scream. The dog panics and runs out with a flaming stick. You chase it. No one sleeps that night, brother. Firth warned you, of course. He said candle clocks are not for the careless, the clumsy, or the easily flammable. You nodded solemnly, already planning to ignore his advice. You try building a small shrine for the candle, a brick base. A bowl of sand nearby, a bucket of water that leaks only slightly. It feels ceremonial, sacred. You light the candle. It promptly sputters, snuffs itself out, and refuses to relight for 3 hours. You call it spiritual resistance? You read somewhere probably graffiti scratched into a monastery bench, that fire is the tongue of time. If so, your candle speaks rudely, it crackles in sarcasm, it drips in judgment. It scorches everything it can reach, as if reminding you that time is not a thing to be contained, it's a thing that burns. You once tried sleeping with the candle burning beside you just to measure how long you slept. You woke up gasping, your blanket smoldering at the edges, and a vague sense that someone, possibly the candle, was laughing. You now sleep in darkness. You dream in flickers. Eventually the village elder pays you a visit, says kindly that the council has discussed your candle experiments and would like you to stop before the entire village becomes a timeline of smoke. You nod. You apologize. You offer him some wax. He declines, visibly afraid. So you put the candle clock away. It's not out of defeat, but out of self-preservation. You bury the scorched table under a cloth. You rinse the wax stains off your fingers. You tell yourself that time from now on will be measured by less flammable means. But part of you still misses it. The flame, small and foolish. The glow, soft and threatening. Time, as it turns out, is beautiful and also trying to kill you. Brother Firth lives by his candles. Not by sun or bells or roosters with superiority complexes. His days are carved, lit, and dripped in wax. He says it brings clarity. It mostly brings questions. He's developed a system. Though system is perhaps too generous a word. It's more of a glowing chaos ritual in 6 parts, each involving candles of different lengths, widths, scents, and possibly personalities. One for waking, one for meals, one for each prayer hour, one labeled contemplation, though you suspect it's really just when he naps with his eyes open. You ask him to explain it. He takes a deep breath. Ah, he says, as if time were a fish that had just leaped into his robe. He begins a slow, looping explanation involving lunar alignments, the density of sheep fat, and a color coding system no one has ever seen. He holds up 3 candles. This, he says, is the pre-prime candle, squat and pinkish, shaped like an uncertain pear. This, he continues, is the post-prime intertors candle. It's tall, slightly bent, and smells faintly of cinnamon and fear. The 3rd candle he refuses to name. To sacred, he whispers. You ask how he keeps track of time between them. I don't, he replies cheerfully. The candles do. You consider the theological implications. Then you consider running. His system involves rotating candles every few hours, swapping them out according to burn rate, wind resistance, and at least once, the sound of geese. He claims it creates perfect spiritual alignment. You watch. As one candle topples over and ignites a hymnal, you question everything. He stores his candles in a box labeled Time. Inside are rows and rows of hand-labeled wax sticks, some burned, some chewed, you don't ask. And at least one clearly shaped like a fish. You wonder briefly if Brother Firth is telling time or slowly unraveling into scented madness. One morning, you witness his candle ritual in full. He wakes, lights a blue candle for matins. It flickers twice, then extinguishes. He nods solemnly. The Lord is testing me. He relights it. It stays lit. He smiles. He is satisfied. At breakfast, he uses a stubby beige candle to signal the halfway point of the meal. You are halfway through chewing when he blows it out. It's time's up, he says, removing your bread with the speed of divine vengeance. In the scriptorium, he lights a candle meant to burn for exactly 1 chapter of copying. It lasts for minutes. The chapter is 27. He declares the rest of the work inspired improvisation. Evening comes. The final candle is lit, long, smooth, carved, with words in Latin you do not understand. It burns in silence. You almost believe in it. Then it explodes with a crackle and spits wax onto a passing novice. Brother Firth nods again. Time is fire. We are all candles. You return home unsure whether you've learned something profound or simply inhaled too much wax smoke. Way, you begin to mark your own time in a new way, before Brother Firth, and after. And honestly, you're not sure which side makes more sense. At night, the monastery is quiet but not still. There's always a candle burning somewhere. And if you follow the smell of old wax and anxious muttering, you'll find Brother Firth in his small stone cell, kneeling by the last flame of the day. This is the Compline candle. It's long, narrow, solemn. It's supposed to burn for just the right length to carry a monk through the evening prayers, into silence, and gently towards sleep. It rarely does. You join him one evening, hoping to experience this holy moment of precision. He nods without. Turning time, he whispers, is delicate now. You sit beside him. The stone is cold, the air damp, the silence full of echoes. The candle flickers like a secret trying not to be heard. The flame leans left, then right, as if unsure which side is holier. Wax drips in slow, uneven tears. Brother Firth chants softly, his voice carrying more sighs than syllables. You try to follow, but the rhythm is strange. Somewhere between a lullaby and a slow argument with sleep, you lose track of the words, then of the hour, then of yourself. The candle dims. It brightens. It pauses dramatically, then flares as if remembering something urgent. You glance at Brother Firth. He hasn't moved. You wonder if he's asleep with his eyes open again, or just spiritually hovering somewhere above his knees. The flame bends toward you. You scoot back. It bends the other way. You consider the possibility that the candle is judging you. Consider the possibility that it's right. You try to focus on the passage of time. But what you feel is less like passing and more like leaking. Time leaks out of the candle, out of the shadows, out of your spine. You don't know what hour it is. You know only that your foot is asleep, and so is part of your will to continue kneeling. Brother Firth exhales. It sounds like the end of a thought. The candle dips again. Wonder if this is the moment, the sacred transition from time into TIMELESS. Sneffs. Down the candle stutters. Pops. Dies. Darkness. You blink into it. Brother Firth does not move. Is it over? You whisper. No, he replies calmly. It's early. You realize he's already reaching for another candle. The ritual resumes. The second candle doesn't light properly. It hisses. It resists. It takes 3 attempts and the muttered assistance of Saint Dimphna. You are now 20 minutes deeper into the unknown. You shift. Your spine pops. The echo sounds like a squirrel stepping on a twig in an empty cathedral. Brother Firth continues, unfazed. Eventually, the candle burns low again. You stare at it until you forget what it is. Just a flicker. Just movement. Soft ticking made of melting light. You leave before the final drip. You need sleep or silence. Or maybe a potato. As you walk back, you look up at the stars. There are no clocks in the sky, only points of cold fire, burning slow. Wonder how Brother Firth does this every night. Wonder if he's measuring time or if he's just waiting for it to forget him. You crawl into bed and think, maybe tomorrow. You'll use a stick in the dirt again. You didn't expect confession to be timed. You thought it would be timeless in the spiritual sense. A quiet conversation, clearing of guilt. Maybe some advice. Maybe a little penance. Instead, you're seated in a dark alcove while Brother Firth lights a candle and announces, when the wax runs out, so does our session. You nod. You regret nodding. The candle is small. Not small like a pebble, small like a threat. It flickers with urgency, like it already knows you're about to confess something long-winded and unnecessary. You try to begin. You cough. You stall. The candle leans forward as if to say, get on with it. You start listing scenes. Some real, some remembered incorrectly, some invented just to fill the silence. You admit to stealing bread crusts, cursing at the rain, and once kicking a bucket out. Of spite. Brother Firth says nothing. Candle, however, seems to burn faster. You swear it flared slightly when you mentioned the bucket. You glance at the wax. It's melting faster than your resolve. You pick up speed. I once lied about a fish. You blurt. Brother Firth raises an eyebrow. You can't tell if it's in judgment or confusion. The flame wobbles dramatically. You are halfway through explaining the fish incident, something involving a missing trout and a neighbor's misunderstanding. About footprints, when the candle makes a small popping sound, The flame sinks into the wax and begins to drown. Brother Firth glances at it. 5 more minutes, he mutters. You speak faster. You don't remember half of what you're saying. Your voice climbs a little. You start confessing dreams, which, doesn't count, but it's either that or sit in silence while a candle judges you.
Then, flame sputters violently.
A final protest, it leaps. It dies. You stare at the smoke. Brother Firth sighs. We'll resume next week, he says. You're not sure if you're forgiven. You're not even sure you finished the trout story. You ask if you can light a new candle. No, he says firmly. You must let time take its course. You leave feeling unsaved, unconvinced, and slightly burnt. Not spiritually, it's just your sleeve again. Later, you try your own candle confession at home. You light one and talk into the air. Burns evenly, politely. No judgment. You feel lighter. Then the wax drips onto your foot, and you return to sin immediately. You understand now. Time, when measured in flame, is crueler than a ticking clock. A clock won't die in the middle of your story. Clock won't hiss when you mention fish. You try again the next day and bring a bigger candle. Brother Firth frowns. Confession is about brevity, he warns. You consider bringing a torch. Next time you consider saying nothing. You consider converting Brother Firth as ill. Or maybe just tired. Or maybe he's conducting a silent protest against time itself. Regardless, he gestures to you with a damp cloth over his forehead and says, the words no one wants to hear, you'll be in charge of the candle today. You nod, trying to look honored. You feel dread. Your job is simple, in theory. Keep the prayer candle burning. Watch it. Measure it. Mark the hours. Easy, like raising a goose politely, or convincing turnips to taste better. Sip aside. The flame and tell yourself, I am responsible for time now. You are not. The first mistake is moving the candle. You think the light will shine better if it's placed nearer the window. You do not consider the draft. The candle flares, then flickers like it's gasping for attention. The wax slides unevenly. The first notch is gone in under 10 minutes. You're ahead of schedule and behind on confidence. You try adjusting the base. The base is a small wooden saucer that wobbles like it was made by someone who'd never seen a flat surface. You wedge a folded piece of parchment underneath. Now, it leans the other way. The flame lists like a drunk sailor and spills wax over your hand. You hiss, then pretend you didn't. The candle judges you silently. Halfway through terse, a fly lands on the wax. You try to shoo it gently. You slap too hard. The candle topples. You catch it barely, but some wax splashes onto the stone. Florin hardens instantly into a shape that looks like guilt. You clean it. Poorly bisexed, the candle is misshapen. The notches have blurred into one long canyon of melted hours. You can no longer tell if it's the 4th hour or the end times. Brother Firth checks in briefly. You smile. He squints at the candle. You've moved it, he says. No. You lie. He nods slowly. He does not trust you. Do not trust yourself. The candle definitely doesn't trust either of you. During none, it suddenly burns bright and high. Unnaturally so. The wick is too long. You trimmed it earlier, but not well. It now resembles a torch. You try to dampen the flame. You blow. You cough. You inhale wax smoke and blink away tears that are not entirely emotional. You attempt to record the candle's progress in the official notebook. You write 5th notch faded at mid-prayer, then cross it out. Then rewrite it as time melted itself, then draw a picture of the candle with a frown. You close the book. When Brother Firth returns in the evening, you offer him the remains. 1 lump of half-burned wax, cloth soaked with regrets, and a room that smells like poor decisions. He says nothing. He lights a new candle. You are dismissed later. That night, you watch your own candle burn. No notches. No marks. Just a quiet flicker. You feel relieved. You feel free. You also feel a slight burn on your thumb again. Time, you realize, should not be in your care. You get an idea. A terrible, ambitious, wax-scented idea. You've seen Brother Firth treat candles like clocks, calendars, spiritual guides, and minor deities. You've watched him pray to them, read by them, scold them. You've seen the candle decide the hour and everyone else nod along like it made sense. So why not bring that wisdom to the people? You will offer time, personal candles, custom hours, portable schedule enlightenment, for a small fee, of course. You call it Rent-A-Flame. Your first customer is your cousin. You give him a candle carved with 6 notches. 1 notch per task, you explain. Let the wax lead you. He lights it. The candle burns past 2 notches in the first 5 minutes. He panics, shovels mud in the wrong field, and accidentally releases a pig. The pig enters the chapel. Your cousin enters denial. Customer 2, Edith, the widow who times her days by goat sounds. She tries your candle during her baking. The wax drips into the dough. The bread comes out scented with beeswax and judgment. She eats it anyway. Chewy, she says. You consider it a half-socks. You start carving candles with more care, deeper grooves, clearer marks. You add symbols. A spoon for mealtime, a boot for errands, a star for dreams. People are interested, till one candle burns straight through. The dream symbol, and under 2 minutes, a child cries. An elderly man declares the future is canceled. Your next prototype includes color-coded wax. Red for labor, blue for rest, yellow for thinking. You quickly realize you are colorblind under candlelight. 3 people take a nap when they were supposed to dig latrines. The consequences are immediate. The candles begin to spread. 1 man uses his 2-time naps. He wakes up mid-snore confused and claims he's lost a week. A woman lights hers during a bath. The wax melts too fast, and she ends up yelling, "I was only halfway through my knees." Someone carves a joke candle, all notches 1 inch. Apart, time flies. Literally, it burns in 10 minutes. Everyone laughs, except you. You weep softly in a corner made of wax shavings and shame. Then come the critics. The priest says it's heresy, that only the divine may measure time, you remind him that Brother Firth uses candles. He reminds you that Brother Firth also tried to baptize a squirrel last week. You do not win the argument. The mayor says it's bad economics, that time should not be melted casually. You ask what better use for time there is. He answers taxes. You stare into the middle distance. Eventually, your wax runs out. The villagers go back to their unreliable roosters, moody bells, and stomach-based timekeeping. Your Rent-A-Flame idea is extinguished. You store the last candle in a box labeled "Do Not Sell." Inside the box are broken dreams, melted hopes, a very small drawing of a pig in a chapel. Later, someone asks you what time it is. You pause. You almost say something about shadows and wax. Instead, you say, probably almost soup. And somehow, everyone understands. It's quiet now. The monastery halls have emptied. Brother Firth is asleep, finally.
Ow.
Or at least motionless, wrapped in his blanket like a sermon in hibernation. You are alone in the scriptorium, seated beside the last candle of the day. You didn't light it, found it already glowing, set in a bowl of sand, with a folded note beneath it that simply read, "Observe, but do not ask." You do as instructed. The flame is steady, small, patient. It does not rush. It does not flicker for attention. It simply burns, like someone who has seen every hour and decided none of them were worth arguing over. You think about all the other candles. The failed ones, the fast ones, the ones that leaned like drunken monks, and the ones that exploded like judgment. This one is different. It doesn't demand your time. It eats it slowly, without apology. The wax drips in perfect rhythm, almost musical. You begin to count the intervals, then stop. It feels wrong to quantify something that clearly doesn't want to be understood. This candle is not for telling time. It's for feeling it, which you now realize is harder. You stare at it until the world fades. The smells of wax and dust merge into something old and comforting, like a forgotten library or a coat you didn't know belonged to you. Outside, the wind shifts. You barely hear it. Inside, the candle burns. You expect a sign, a pop, a shift, a lesson. Instead, nothing. The wax slides down the sides in slow, curving streams. The flame leans once, almost imperceptibly, then straightens itself again. The candle says nothing. You listen anyway. Minutes pass, or maybe hours. There is no bell, no footsteps, no Brother Firth coughing in the hallway. Just you, a chair, a splinter in your robe, and a candle that may have started before. You were born and may keep burning after you've gone. You begin to understand something, but it doesn't translate. It's not into words, not into thoughts. It's just a soft awareness that time isn't kept, it isn't captured, it isn't told, it happens. If you're lucky, you notice you watch the last of the wax pool around the base. The wick leans, the flame dims. It sighs not aloud. But in presence, then it goes out. No drama, no smoke, just gone. You don't move right away. You sit in the dark and feel what's left. It's not regret, not peace. Just the quiet echo of something that used to be fire. Eventually, you stand. You return the empty. Candle holder 2, Brother Firth's shelf, between one shaped like a bell and another shaped like a question mark. You leave the note beneath it, just as it was. Observe, but do not ask. You don't ask. You walk home slowly, the stars above you silent. The earth below still turning, whether you measure it or not. You discover it under the floor, in what used to be a kitchen, and is now a kitchen in name only. A cold corner with a pot, a nail, and a smell that suggests someone once tried to cook an onion by whispering encouragement at it. The stone slab was hidden beneath rotted wood, old straw, and an enthusiastic colony of ants. You clear it with the reverence of someone who hopes foolishly that they've discovered something valuable. What you found is a circle, a very worn circle. Carved lines, some numbers maybe. It looks like a sundial, lazy one. It has a small hole in the middle, where the gnomon, the part that casts the shadow, used to be. You stick a stick. In it, it leans. You straighten it, it leans again. Eventually you prop it with a rock and step back. Nothing happens. The sun is out, or so you think. It's trying. It's that particular kind of gray sunlight that makes everything look suspicious and damp. You watch the stick does not move. The shadow it casts is vague, half-hearted, and points nowhere useful. It suggests vaguely that it might be either morning or despair o'clock. Still, you wait. The stone warms. Your knees do not. The chickens gather around to observe your efforts with the blank curiosity of creatures who never needed to know the hour, because they are the hour. One of them pecks at your stick. Time wobbles. You glare. She does not care. You look closer at the carved lines. They're uneven. One is thicker. One is curved. One trails off like the carver sneezed halfway through. Numbers, if they are, numbers are not in any order you recognize. One looks like a 4 or a fork. Another might be a fish. Begin to suspect this is not a sundial.
This might be a game board.
Or a warning. Your neighbor passes by and says, "Ah, you found the June dial." You blink. "Only works in June," he adds, as if this makes perfect sense. Sun hits it just right. Whole week sometimes. If it tells the time, no. He says, "But it's very confident about noon. One day a year. Very confident." You stare at the stick. You wonder if you're that stick. Upright, hopeful, misunderstood. You spend the day checking it. The shadow shifts slightly. It grows long, then short, then long again. Or maybe the chicken is back. You no longer trust. The shadow or the chicken, or your own resolve. Eventually, you abandon the sundial. It doesn't care. It remains smug and warm and stubbornly June-based. You step away. Just as a thin beam of sun pierces the clouds and hits the dial squarely, for a brief moment, the shadow aligns perfectly with one of the thicker lines. You don't know what it means. You just know you missed it. You decide to make your own sundial. How hard can it be? It's just a flat thing with a stick after all, a rock with delusions of precision. You begin with optimism. You find a slab of stone behind the barn, roughly square if you squint and tilt your head. It's cracked, mossy, and has one corner that smells faintly of mildew and failed marriages. You drag it into the yard with great effort and absolutely no help from your cousin, who claims to be praying, but is mostly sleeping with his eyes open. Next, you search for the perfect stick, a gnomon, His brother Firth once called it, before falling asleep mid-definition. You find one that's straight, dry, and probably not cursed. You drive it into the center of the stone using a rock and some anger. It wobbles. You add more anger, still wobbles, marking the hours. You try to watch the shadow. You try to watch the shadow. You try to note where it lands every hour. But the sun keeps moving in unpredictable ways. Faster than you expected, slower than you hoped. The shadow shortens, elongates, vanishes behind clouds, and once appears to point directly at your neighbor's chicken, who takes it very personally. You scratch lines into the stone where you think the shadow landed. Some are wide, some are crooked. One is interrupted by a sudden sneeze. Eventually, the stone begins to look less like a clock and more like a treasure map drawn by someone with no concept of treasure or maps. You try to test it. The next day, you rise early. The sun is out. The stick casts a shadow. It points between two lines. You declare it breakfast time. You eat. Later, the shadow shifts. It lands precisely on a mark you labeled dig potatoes. You do. You dig for an hour. Then realize the mark was meant for afternoon nap. The potatoes now look confused. So do you. You add symbols, sun for noon, a star for evening, a turnip for unclear reasons. You forget what the turnip was for. You write maybe soup beside it. The villagers begin to notice. They ask what you're doing. Say, telling time. They say, looks like you're summoning geese. You don't correct them, your cousin visits. He walks around the stone 3 times, squints, and says, this is just a rock with a stick in it. You nod. That's what all clocks are, really, eventually. The chickens adopt it as a new gathering place. They perch on it. They peck at the shadow. One removes the stick entirely. Time, again, collapses. You try to fix it. You carve new lines. You polish the stone. You speak to the sun directly, asking it politely to be consistent. It declines. One afternoon, just before rain, the shadow lands perfectly on a mark. You don't. Remember what the mark means. But for one brief, beautiful second, the sundial looks like it knows something. Then it starts to drizzle. The shadow fades. The chickens. Return in time, as always, goes on without you. One day, a man arrives at your village with a long cloak. It's a very short beard, and the kind of confident walk usually reserved for people who've never fallen in a puddle of turnip mash. He sees your sundial. He stops. He smiles the way people smile before saying something unhelpful. Ah, he says, an ancient solar chronometer. You nod slowly. You were calling it rock clock. But his words sound more expensive. He walks around it in a slow circle, tapping his chin like he's inspecting a royal tapestry. These markings, he says, squinting, are clearly druidic. You did not know that druids measured time with uneven scratches and one carving that may or may not be a potato, he continues. This one, the bent line, it denotes the mid-month solstice adjustment. Fascinating. You are 80% sure that line was made when you sneezed while holding the carving stick. He leans in and touches the gnomon. Ah, yes. Oak. A sacred wood. You found it in the firewood pile, wedged. Between 2 logs and a spoon, he stands upright and declares, I can read this. You let him. He waves his arms like a weathered librarian conducting invisible bees. The shadow is currently falling near the 5th mark after zenith. That places us at approximately ... 3rd quarter afternoon. You blink. He smiles. You look at the shadow. It is pointing vaguely at a mark you originally labeled maybe snack. He nods solemnly. Yes, the sacred snack hour. You wonder if you've gone mad, or if he has. Or if this is what time actually feels like when explained by someone. With a hat full of secrets, he pulls out a small notebook and begins sketching your sundial with exaggerated seriousness. He mumbles something about pre-Christian solar alignment in the arc of feathered precision. You don't know what that means? You nod anyway? Yeah. You're nodding a lot today? A few villagers gather. They listen. They murmur in approval. Edith says, I always knew it was druidic. Your cousin says, that explains the turnip. You try to protest gently, but no one hears you. The man is explaining how the angle of the rock is. Eerily in tune with the June solstice crossbeam. You don't know what a crossbeam is? Neither does he. He finishes by saying this is a relic. A spiritual timekeeper, a silent bell tower of the earth. Then he leaves. Just like that, you are left with your sundial, your suspicions, and a half-carved chicken footprint you were working on before he arrived. That evening, people begin to treat the sundial differently. They bring it small offerings, herbs, stones, one very confused frog. Someone prays near it. A child draws a face on the stone and names it Old Father Time. You don't stop them, because you realize something. The sundial might not measure time, but it now creates it. And sometimes, belief burns longer than sunlight. It begins. Like most bad ideas, with curiosity and boredom, you can't sleep. The hut creaks. The straw smells unusually philosophical. You step outside where the air is damp. The moon is hiding behind what feels like every cloud that's ever existed, and the chickens are giving you suspicious glances. You turn to your sundial. It sits quietly in the dark, deeply unemployed. You stare at it. It stares back. In theory, you know how sundials work. Sun casts a shadow. Shadow moves. Time moves with it. But part of you wonders, what if you just need the right kind of night? A clear one. A clever one. A moment of moonlight cooperation. Tonight is not that night. Still, you prod a stick back into the gnomon hole. You sit beside the stone. You wait. You see nothing. The shadow doesn't exist. Of course it doesn't. There's no light to cast it. But part of you believes, just for a moment, that if you stare hard enough, the sundial will reveal secret night hours, darker than dark, more ancient than bells, a kind of time known. Only two moths and owls? You stare. You see moths and an owl. The owl stares back, unimpressed. You light a candle to help. The flame flickers wildly in the wind, casting erratic shadows across the dial. For a brief moment, it points directly at the mark you once labeled emergency nap. The candle goes out. You sit in silence and consider the possibility that time at night. It's just judgment in the shape of cold air. You try relighting the candle, shielding it with your hand.
Oh.
The light dances across the rock like it's mocking you in interpretive. Fire language. The stick casts 3 different shadows in 3 different directions. One points at soup, one points at dig, and one appears to point inside your own soul. You blow the candle out and apologize. I'm sure to whom. Still unwilling to quit, you try moonlight. The clouds part just slightly. A hazy beam brushes the edge of the sundial, glows faintly, beautifully, like an idea that's about to be forgotten. You hold your breath. Shadow appears. Or maybe it doesn't. It might just be your own doubt. You elongate it. You squint. You swear the shadow twitches. You think, is it midnight? Or have I invented midnight by believing in it too hard? Then the clouds return, the shadow, real or imagined, disappears. You sigh. You pat the stone like it's a tired old friend who meant well but couldn't stay awake. You return inside, smelling of smoke, wet grass, and mild cosmic failure. You lie down on your straw mattress, convinced of one thing. Sundials do not work at night. But you also feel, oddly, that something did pass. Not a minute. Not an hour. Just a sliver of something that didn't need a name. Time, when unmeasured, feels softer, heavier, like a blanket made of fog. You fall asleep wondering, what if the sundial still counts, but only the moments no one sees? You return to your sundial after 3 days of rain and 1 day of pretending the rain hadn't happened. The stone is slick with moss. The gnome on your proud, slightly bent stick has vanished. In its place is a small carrot. You stare. At the carrot, you turn slowly to find a child standing nearby, grinning with the confidence of someone who has never failed at timekeeping because they've never tried. I fixed it, she says. You want to say many things? Why a carrot? Where's my stick? What even is time to you? But instead, you nod, because this child is holding a second carrot, and you sense a threat. She explains helpfully that sticks are boring, and carrots have personality. You cannot argue with that. You try. You fail. Around the edge of the dial, she's added new marks, using what appears to be berry juice, soot, and possibly jam, instead of ours. The segments are labeled with phrases like, when frogs sing, it's after bread, leaf shadow time, and big yawn moment. You are horrified. You are intrigued. She begins a demonstration. The sun, which has finally returned like a nervous guest to its own party, casts a shadow from the carrot across the dial. It lands somewhere between after bread and before. Goat screaming, she declares this moment to be perfect for thinking quietly. You try it, you sit, you think. It does feel right. She points out a new feature. A pinnacone placed carefully at the side. That's the alarm, she says. You ask how it works? She says you just look at it sometimes. There's no logic. Somehow that makes it more accurate. Then your old system of wobbly notches and regrets. A few villagers wander by. They ask what's going on. The child explains her system. One man nods thoughtfully. Another removes his hat in respect. It says she always trusted carrots more than sticks. You did not know this was a personality trait. Now you do. The child begins to customize sundials for others. She uses turnips, feathers, one shiny stone, and a beetle named Peter. Each sundial is ridiculous. Each one makes sense. One man uses his to decide when to nap. Another waits until the carrot shadow touches the feels suspicious zone before having important conversations. You try not to be jealous. You remind yourself that you started this sundial, that it was your rock, your gnomon. But now, it has become something else, something warmer. Less about precision, more about presence. You ask the child if she'll make a version for your own yard. She agrees, solemnly but warns. It only works if you believe in it, and also if the carrot stays upright. You agree? Well, later that evening, the carrot falls over. The sun fades. You leave it lying there. Tomorrow, it will point somewhere new. Time, you realize, was never meant to be exact, only edible. It's June now, proper June. Not maybe June, or nearly June, or feels like it could be June. The air smells warm and grassy. Birds are louder. Your knees ache slightly less. It must be real. You walk out to the sundial without hope. Bye. Now, it's more decoration than device. The carrot is gone. The child has moved on to timing things with dandelions. You don't blame her. You've moved on mostly to guessing the hour by how dry your lips feel or whether Edith is baking again. But the sun is strong this morning. Clear, undeniable. The sky is so blue, it feels sarcastic. The stone sits calmly like a creature that knows its purpose, even if it rarely uses it. You find your old gnomon, the stick, slightly bent, slightly familiar, and place it in the center hole, not because you expect anything, but because it's June, and what else is June for, if not testing old hope? You wait, and this time it works. The shadow is sharp, clean. It points directly to one of the lines you carved. The one you meant for mid-morning, the one you accidentally made deeper because you sneezed. You blink, you check the sun, you check the mark. It aligns. You sit, over the next few hours. The shadow moves with calm certainty from breakfast to rest to maybe check the goat. Every mark lines up. Every groove you once scratched in frustration now holds meaning. Even the fork-shaped one, which you thought was a disaster, now signals lunch with divine precision. The villagers pass by and nod approvingly. Edith says, I always knew it was a June dial. Your cousin tries to claim credit for helping carve it. You let him. Let everyone believe what they need to. You remain seated, watching time flow not in seconds or ticks, but in a quiet shadow sliding across. Stone, it lasts most of the day. Then, slowly, the clouds return. The light fades. The shadow blurs, softens, disappears. You do not mind, because for one day, one full, glorious, stupid, beautiful day, your sundial worked, exactly as it should. You don't need to carve more marks. You don't need to explain. You don't even need the stick anymore. You just sit beside the stone. You remember what it looked like when it all aligned. How time moved silently, but clearly. How the earth turned, and for once you felt it not as pressure, but as rhythm. The sun sets. You stand. Brush dust from your knees and walk inside. And as you close your door behind you, you think, maybe. Once a year is enough, maybe that's all any of us get. The third hour after dawn is when the noble household rises. Not because the sun commands it, or because work demands it, but because centuries of tradition have decided that. Dignity begins after a long line and a light pastry. You wake in the servants' quarters, because of course you're not the noble. You are awake at the first hour, possibly even the 0th hour, if such a thing exists. You've already lit fires, aired bedding, crushed herbs for a bath no one will thank you for, and located someone's missing slipper, which was somehow in the soup pot again. But the third hour is when everything officially begins. Bells are rung gently, but with the sort of insistence that says, we are important, and you are late. Nobles are stirred by maids with soft voices and cold hands. Windows are unlatched to let in the curated breeze. You are sent to fetch warm water, which is somehow always too warm or not warm enough. The master of the house yawns loudly, theatrically, as though it's a performance, and the audience is made of ghosts. He is swaddled in linens and judgment, does not move without assistance. You are that assistance. You are a one-person committee of prodding, lifting, buttoning, and nodding agreeably to every nonsense phrase he mutters before breakfast. Is it the third hour already? He says, knowing it is. Double quotes, yes, my lord, you say, having whispered the time into his pillow 10 minutes ago. The lady of the house rises more quietly but no less ceremoniously. She receives a combing that lasts longer than most outdoor feasts. Her gown is chosen according to the hour, the mood, the weather, and once, the alignment of a bird on the windowsill. You are not allowed to speak during this process unless spoken to. And when you are spoken to, it's always about the wrong temperature of rose water. The third hour is sacred, not for prayer, not for labor, but for becoming visible. Servants scurry. Cloaks are fluffed. Breakfast is laid out in a hall large enough to echo every complaint. The nobility sit, yawn again, and glance at food like it's a suggestion, not a necessity. You serve the bread. It must be sliced just so, not too thick, lest you imply they are peasants, and not too thin, lest you imply they are being punished. You butter it invisibly. You pour tea with the grace of someone who knows an incorrect pour angle is a declaration of war. The noble son appears halfway through the hour, still in nightclothes, still convinced he is dreaming. He asks what day it is. You tell him. He forgets. Immediately, you have been awake for 4 hours. You have trimmed 3 wicks, fed 2 dogs, removed 1 bat from the chimney, and scrubbed your own hands with sand because soap is too luxurious for your station. They eat a cherry and declare the morning exhausting. You nod. You smile. You go back to the kitchen where time is marked not by bells but by burns. The 6th hour is when the day begins to show its teeth, not sharp ones. Exactly, but the kind worn smooth by chewing expectations. For nobles, this is the hour of refinement. For you, it's the hour of fetching things no one should need at this time of day. In theory, the 6th hour marks the turning point, halfway between morning duties and afternoon leisure. In practice, it's when the wine appears, not for celebration, not for thirst, for ritual, for balance, for the belief that the body, like the moon, should wax and wane with flavor. The steward rings a tiny bell, and you appear already holding the tray, because you know what's coming. You always know. The nobles nod, pleased, as though the wine materialized from prayer. You uncork the bottle in silence. You pour precisely. Too little and you're accused of stinginess. Too much, and it becomes scandalous indulgence. There is no winning, only adjusting. You try to avoid eye contact as they sniff, swirl, and sip with the kind of solemnity usually reserved for funerals or cheese selection. One lord clears his throat and says, I detect notes of oak and reflection. You nod. You resist the urge to mention, It was stored in a barrel that previously held salted fish. A. Younger noble asks for water instead, just to cleanse the palate. You bring it. You are punished with silence. Water is not fashionable at the 6th hour. It suggests doubt, suggests clarity, suggests that you are not participating in the collective delusion of sophistication. The wine is poured again. 1. Lady insists hers must be warmed by the hearth. Another wants hers cooled in a basin of river stones. A third claims she can tell when the bottle was opened based on the mood of the cork. You begin to wonder if wine should simply be served with. A disclaimer. This beverage may cause poetry and poor decision-making. Outside, the peasants are breaking for their midday meal. Bread, mostly, some onions. A strip of something pretending to be meat. Their 6th hour tastes like salt and sun. Yours tastes like cork and confusion. The nobles grow louder. The 6th hour is when conversation starts to bloom, or curdle, depending. On the guests, someone begins a debate about whether grapes from the east hold more melancholy than those from the south. You are asked your opinion. You say south, my lord. He nods. You were wrong. He likes to disagree. The hour drips on. Like the candle clocks you've seen, except these flames are social, flickering, sputtering, sometimes setting things alight. Laughter erupts, then vanishes. A goblet tips. You catch it. They don't notice. You dry it with the back of your sleeve, which has already dried 3 this morning. Eventually, a bell chimes again. The steward clears his throat. The hour is past, he says, as if announcing the death of a minor duke. Everyone stands. You collect the glasses. Some are still full. One contains a flower. One contains a very drunk bee. You go back to the kitchen, lips dry, hands shaking slightly. You drink a cup of water. It tastes like rebellion. The 9th hour arrives with ceremony, or, more accurately, with the illusion of ceremony held together by sleepy nobles and expensive smoke. You are summoned not with urgency, but with a slow wave of the steward's fingers like he's swatting. Away time itself. This hour is for contemplation, reflection, gentle music, burned herbs. Everyone pretends to be deeply alert. Everyone is, in truth, one cushion away from sleep. You enter the chamber with the incense box held high. The nobles sit in a semicircle, arranged like decorative pillows. Some have their eyes closed in spiritual focus. Some are clearly asleep but have mastered the art of not snoring. One has slipped partially sideways, and no one seems to know if it's intentional. You place the incense in the brass burner. It hisses, curls, and releases. A ribbon of scented air that smells like a church married a garden, and they've been fighting ever since. The room fills with haze. You cough quietly, then try to stop coughing even more quietly. The lady of the house narrows her eyes. You bow and pretend your lungs are full of reverence, not regret. A young scribe appears and begins to sing softly, tunelessly, with the enthusiastic effort of someone who knows they're being ignored, but has been told this is their big moment. You stand by the door. You count bricks to stay awake. The nobleman nearest the incense is now fully reclined. His expression suggests he's conversing with saints, or perhaps thinking about bread. Another lady fans herself with a page from last month's sermon notes. The music continues. The smoke continues. Your thoughts begin to resemble the smoke. Slow, swirling, vague. You almost doze off. A servant beside you nods off entirely. She jolts awake and drops a spoon. The sound echoes through the chamber like divine punishment. Everyone opens one eye, then closes it again. The ritual continues. No one knows what exactly is supposed to happen during the 9th hour. There's no official script, just a sense that things must be quiet, fragrant, and mildly spiritual. You once tried asking the steward what the purpose was, he said, to remind us of the weight of time, then sneezed violently from the incense and excused himself for the rest of the hour. Eventually, the scribe finishes his song, a piece titled Soft Light of the Fifth Lamp. It contains exactly 3 notes, repeated 29 times. Applause is not required. No one moves. You think one person might have died, but then they shift and mutter something about peaches. The bell chimes. Faintly, everyone stands. The great effort of people pretending they hadn't just fused with the furniture. You carry out the incense. Burner. Your tunic now smells permanently of scorched rosemary and ancient upholstery. Back in the corridor, you breathe air, not curated for elegance. It tastes like freedom, and for a brief moment, you consider lighting a candle in your own room, not for ritual, not for music, just to remind yourself you're still awake, then you remember. It's only the 9th hour and there's more to come. By the 11th hour, the nobles' stomachs are full, their eyelids are heavy, and their thoughts, such as they are, drift toward the most sacred ritual of the day. Conversation. Not just any conversation. There's no shouting, no debating, and certainly no facts. This is refined murmuring, whispered insight, lightly seasoned complaints served with a garnish of poetic metaphor. The kind of talk that floats just above meaning, like steam from a teacup that no one actually drinks. You arrive with the teacups anyway. Empty, of course. No one wants tea. They just want something to hold, while making observations about the nature of time, weather, and who looked tired at Mass last week. You place the porcelain down softly, so as not to interrupt a theory currently. Being whispered about geese and moral decay, a nobleman speaks first. I believe the 11th hour holds within it the weight of unspoken decisions, he says. Everyone nods. No one knows what it means. You refill nothing. They sip nothing. The cups remain untouched, but important. A lady leans in to observe that. The cook's apprentice was seen carrying parsley before the bell rang for preparation. The implication? Profound, possibly treasonous, possibly just parsley. You are asked your opinion. You blink.
You say perhaps he was hungry, my lady.
The entire group goes quiet. Someone writes it down. You may have just said something wise. You may have just insulted someone's uncle. You are not asked to speak again. Another noble declares that the clouds this week have looked uncertain. Everyone agrees. Another insists that pigeons have grown bolder. A third wonders aloud. If soup knows when it's being judged, there is no punchline. Only silence. The steward coughs. This signals the introduction of controlled speculation, the final stage of 11th hour talk. Controlled speculation is not quite rumor, but not quite news. It lives in the purgatory between I heard and I imagined. It's performed. With the tone of someone remembering a dream about politics, today's topic, whether Lady Isobel's horse is really a horse, or simply very well trained. You excuse yourself to wipe a non-existent spill. When you return, someone is discussing weather. The timing of the midday bell causes emotional imbalance. Someone else argues that the timing is fine. It's just that people choose the wrong emotions. Another says, I once felt anxious at the 6th hour. Everyone nods solemnly, as if they too have experienced temporal anxiety. You deliver. Honeyed wafers. No one eats them. You stand silently, watching these strange, perfumed creatures discuss time without measuring it. Mark change without moving. Drink air as if it had flavor. One man taps the side of his teacup 3 times. That, he says, is the sound of certainty. You step backward slowly. When the bell finally rings, it's soft, almost guilty. The nobles rise, as if waking from shared sleep. The steward announces, the 11th hour has concluded. Someone whispers, it never really ends. You return to the kitchen, arms full of untouched teacups, pockets full of half-thoughts. And you think, not for the first time. The rich don't measure time, they narrate it. By dusk, the noble house softens. Voices drop, curtains are drawn. Everything smells faintly of lavender and expensive forgetting. This is the final hour ritual. Not quite an ending, but a carefully staged pause in the performance of being. Rich, you are handed the incense again, not the strong stuff from the 9th hour, but something gentler, sweeter, made from dried flowers and illusions. You carry it carefully into the drawing room, where light has been dimmed to the kind of golden glow that makes everyone look wealthier than they are. The nobles lounge. Not sit, not recline. Lounge, like paintings halfway to fading. The ritual is simple. Burn incense and say nothing, or say things that feel like nothing. The point is not communication. The point is presence, stillness, controlled vanishing. You light the incense with a taper. The smoke begins its slow spiral upward, curls through the air like it's trying to write poetry, then gives up halfway through the second stanza. Nobleman nearest the burner watches the smoke as if it contains secrets. He blinks slowly. He might be asleep, or meditating, or possibly dead. You are not allowed to ask, the lady of the house sighs. Not dramatically, just enough to suggest she's recently remembered something beautiful and mildly tragic. Like a song or a specific apple. You step back into the shadows. The room is so quiet that even your breathing feels like a betrayal. You exhale through your nose, silently apologizing to the moment. Outside, the sky dims further. Birds make their final sounds. You see one perched on the windowsill, watching the ritual as if to judge whether it, too, should begin burning herbs and pretending to be mysterious. The smoke continues. It never hurries. It simply leaves, slowly, gracefully, as if it knows. It will never be remembered, and doesn't mind. No one speaks, except once, when a boy at the edge of the room whispers, "Is this prayer?" His mother answers, "No, darling, this is refinement." You're unsure what that means. You watch as someone places a single fig on a tray and then doesn't eat it. Sits there, a symbol of restraint, of hunger tamed, of fruit that will never fulfill its purpose. Eventually, a small bell rings. The nobles rise, slowly, like thoughts drifting to a different page. No one says goodnight. No one needs to. The ritual is the farewell. The incense is the punctuation mark. You collect the tray. The fig is still there. You eat it in the hallway without shame. You carry the empty burner back to the storeroom. Surface is warm in your hands. Not hot, just warm. It's like something that remembers being sacred but isn't anymore. You don't look at the clock. You don't need to. The hour has passed softly,
Endlessly.
like it was never really there. The sensenly sent out with the like to bicep that does at him where prior we says that I went lysis with we under this comes like a rumor, not shouted, not announced, not even whispered. It just arrives softly, sideways. With the sound of slippers on old wooden floors, and the distant creak of something you'd rather not identify. There is no bell for midnight. No candle is lit. No servant is summoned to announce the hour has turned. The hour simply is. The rich have no need to mark it. They already assume time waits politely outside their doors, dusting its boots and asking permission to enter. You are still awake. Not by choice, by assignment. Tonight you're tasked with tending the lower corridor, a drafty hallway with 3 empty chairs, a tapestry of a tree that looks perpetually surprised, and a door that never opens but must always be watched. The house is still. So still that your heartbeat sounds impolite. Your candle is low, the flame twitching like it too, is afraid of being overheard. You sit, you listen. Somewhere in the walls, mice hold a meeting. Somewhere above, the noble family dreams of things you'll never be invited to. Banquets that never happened. Horses that always obey. Conversations that end before you speak. Midnight is their quiet hour. But it's not for sleep. Some wander. You've seen them. A pale figure floating past the staircase, holding a book they never read. A man in velvet, muttering a phrase under his breath, again and again, as if trying to turn it into a prayer. A maid with soft steps and a 1,000-yard stare, carrying a tray with nothing on it. These are not ghosts. These are the living, practicing how to vanish. You shift in your chair. You nearly fall asleep. And the door creaks. Not open, just creaks. You stare at it. It doesn't move again. It just reminds you who's in charge. Midnight is the hour when the house remembers its own secrets. You think about what the nobles believe, that the third hour is for waking, the sixth for sipping, the ninth for breathing, the 11th for murmuring, dusk for disappearance, but midnight. Midnight is for being silent about it all. You hear footsteps in the next hallway, not hurrying, not hesitant, just there. You do not investigate. You never investigate. That is rule 1 of midnight service. If it's quiet and moving, let it be. You take a breath. You count the candle's flickers. You think about how many hours you've watched today, and how few of them have watched you back. The flame dims. Your eyes blur. Your head nods just once. When you wake, it's still night, but something's shifted. The candle has burned out. The hallway feels emptier than before. The door is just a door again. You rise slowly. Your knees complain in quiet Latin. You return to your cot with the gentleness of someone who has witnessed a private performance and knows not to ask for an encore. And as you pull the blanket over your shoulders, you understand one final truth. About the rituals of the rich, they don't use time. They let it pass through them like smoke, pretending it was always meant to do so. The hours had passed slowly, softly, with footsteps you could barely hear and shadows that stretched just far enough to remind you they were watching. You've seen candles try to count what cannot be counted. Sundials fail gloriously in the rain. Noble rituals drift like incense into the folds of silence. Time, it turns out, is not always a number. Sometimes it's a flicker, a scent. Pause between footsteps. Thank you for staying until the end. Whether you drifted off halfway through or followed every hour to the last breath of wax, I'm glad you were here. And now, as you lie there, you know the loop will wait once more. For you,